If you know anything about the other side, you have to imagine there's like a glass wall that when they bump into you, it's just as scary for them to see somebody living as it is for us to see somebody from the other side or catch a glimpse of them.
Cockington is a small village that lies between the southern slopes of Dartmoor and the sea in southern England. It's surrounded by lush green pastures, and it has an almost picture postcard beauty, with its neat rows of whitewashed cottages with their clipped thatched roofs and its narrow winding streets. At its centre lies the village green and an ancient coaching inn. The Drum Inn has a long history, but in more recent times it had a reputation as a haunt for bikers. In the 60s and 70s, motorcyclists gathered here from all over southern England.
Going back about 15 years ago, the Drum Inn was well known in the area as being a biker's pub. It was a gradual thing that had occurred over a period of time, but in about the mid-70s, you couldn't come anywhere near Cockington without seeing swarms of motorcycles. The problem then was a commercial thing, was that it was putting off other types of visitors to the area and to the pub in particular. Families would drive up to the pub and see hordes of motorcycles parked outside.
What is less well known, indeed it's known only to a small group of people, is that the inn also has a ghost. A ghost, or an apparition it seems, of a motorcyclist dressed in full leather gear. He has been experienced at various times over the past 5 or 6 years, in particular by the 3 or 4 people who live and work here.
It's late one night. Normally I can run up and down to the cellar, absolutely no problem whatsoever. But we just closed, so I was doing all my usual cellar work that I had to do. And as I went down into the cellar, I carried on down. As I hit the actual cellar floor, I came over with an immense sense of chill and cold, and I could hardly move. It was quite frightening at the time, looking back on it. I mean, it doesn't affect me now, but it just happened this once where, you know, this presence made itself known.
Quite often when I'm working alone in the cellar, I catch things out of the corner of my eye, look round expecting people to be standing behind me, and hearing things that I really can't explain.
Within the first year of us living here, I noticed there was always somebody behind me or a movement at the corner of my eye. I could never quite understand what it was. And one winter's evening, I was working in the kitchen, and somebody came in through the door. And my dog, who is a guard dog, would usually bark very loudly, or if it was a member of staff, would wag her tail and be very excited. And this evening, she just didn't move, she didn't stir, and this person walked down in a leather biker gear, with a helmet and everything like that, and I couldn't work out who he was, and he was taking his gloves off, and he turned to walk down where you hang your coats up. At this time of year, all the back doors are locked, because obviously for security, and as I walked to meet him, he totally vanished and disappeared, and I just couldn't understand, you know, what it was. But I saw it so clearly, and even to this day, I know exactly what I saw and how I saw it.
Until a couple of years ago, that was about as far as it went. Then a pop group from Plymouth was invited to play at the inn. The lead singer was a young woman called Chrissy. She had a slightly unusual background. She'd been brought up as a gypsy, and she would describe herself as a sensitive. At one point in the evening, the entire group was invited down into the cellar.
We were sort of, I think, just sitting around being sociable, and something was said to the landlady about the history behind the pub, and I think that initiated something on the lines of a mysterious happening, or something had been felt, a presence of some sort. I think she sort of was quite interested to see whether it could actually pick anything up. So I think in the heat of the excitement, everybody trundled down to the cellar to sort of see if they could feel or see something. I don't know what their expectations were, whether they were expected to see this floating sheet above them and go, ooh, but they sort of seemed, it very quickly calmed down, and the minute they got that got down there, they realised that something wasn't going to materialise, or it wasn't quite as clear cut as people imagine. And at that point I said, would you mind leaving me on my own? So they did.
Within a few minutes of the others leaving, Chrissy began an encounter with a spirit, or an entity, call it what you will, that if you accept it at face value, takes us into a different world. It seems to give a most extraordinary view of what is often called the other side.
Right in the corner of that cellar is it looks like a huge cupboard, and the minute the sort of air cleared, he just walked out and said hello, and we just immediately got into conversation with each other. I didn't ask him the sort of questions that people would automatically think of asking, like, how did you die? How long have you been dead? It's actually like talking to somebody else who's living, but acknowledging the fact that there are some personal questions that you don't ask. He was about 5'9" or 10, medium build, quite long in the legs, and completely dressed in leather with large boots. And he held his helmet the whole time, his crash helmet, under his arm. It never moved from his body. It was almost like it was attached to him. Obviously everything was black. I don't really remember much about his facial features because I couldn't really see him that well in the light. He spoke with a sort of local accent, but again it's hard to actually remember exactly what his dialect was.
Chrissy claims that she had what amounts to a conversation with the young motorcyclist, in which he described his continuing life or existence or being. Difficult to know what word to use. Almost as if there had been no interruption, no discontinuity. She claims, for example, that he described how he still spends hours polishing and cleaning his bike, even chatting to his mates.
It was his private place. He liked to be there. He spent time with his friends. It was good, happy times, peaceful times, cleaning his bike, sitting, talking, just having time out, I think, from the everyday burdens that all of us face, during the day, whether it's work or other commitments. And that he wanted to make sure that I knew that it was his private domain. He didn't want that interrupted at all, and that he was quite shy and very apologetic at the hint of upsetting anybody or causing any anxiety. So I think what was so noticeable about him was that as a biker, he was really quite shy and reserved. So it seems obvious to me that it was a great effort for him to come out and speak to me. I think he must have heard everybody trundle down to the cellar.
In her quite extraordinary account, Chrissy creates a picture that has echoes of ancient civilizations in Egypt and China and elsewhere, where people were buried with their possessions and their musical instruments and so on, to continue their life on the other side. She claims, for example, to have talked with the ghostly biker even about the music he still listened to.
The music that he referred to was very much the sort of music of the 70s, the Born to Be Wild stuff, and anything that was to do with the masculinity of riding a bike. Because he was a shy type, he didn't seem to be that keen on the real aggressive rock that's out. I think he just enjoyed the sort of 70s stuff, really. I think sort of bikers, their own language is through their clothes, obviously the machine they ride, and the language of music, so that's quite significant. I felt that the time that he gave me was very precious anyway, and I didn't feel it was right to keep him.
The extraordinary encounter in the basement of the village inn between the singer and the biker's ghost contained such extraordinary detail that we decided to call in an internationally known psychic medium to see if he could make contact, and if so, would the accounts match up. We gave him no information other than the fact that there had been a number of sightings. When he arrived at the inn, Peter, the medium, spent some time exploring the house, and then he sat down in a particular corner, as it happened, where several strange experiences had taken place. And almost immediately, he began to hold what can only be described as a conversation with something or someone unseen. But the similarities to Chris's description were quite remarkable.
I've got a young man. He's in his early 20s, perhaps heading up towards 25, 23, 25, something like that. He feels as though he's slim, quite slim, and a bit taller than me, so that makes him, what, 6'1", something like that. He's got a motorbike helmet on, which he's taken off, and his hair comes down to about here on his neck. It's darker hair, much darker than mine, towards the black. He had an accident about 3 or 4 miles away from here. But the reason that he's in here is because this was the local place that he used to come to. This is where his friends were. He feels at home here. And he's made me sit in his seat because this is where he prefers to be. The message that I'm getting is that he, in fact, just before he died, there seems to have been some emotional upset with some young lady, which caused him a great deal of grief and anxiety and led to him, not directly but indirectly, led to him actually having the accident which killed him. It was an accident that killed him, it wasn't a deliberate thing. There's a great deal of sorrow building up around him. I feel a great deal of sadness inside him, and the feeling is that he's been wandering around here for a long, long time, trying to go over, but he's just wanting to say he's sorry. Now, he's talking about people because he's frightened quite a few people by his sudden appearances. And what he's saying is that every so often the emotion, the feeling, the emotion around him gets so strong that he just materializes to other people. He's not materializing to me in that sense at the moment, but other people will no doubt have seen him in a solid form. And this is when he's either attracted to somebody because of the sympathy that they would send out to him, or else the pain that he's suffering at that precise point is too much. Now, he doesn't do this very often. He's talking about 6 appearances that he's made to various people over the last 4 or 5 years especially over the last 4 or 5 years. So he's gradually been building up to a stage where he's asking to be released and to get away from it all.
Peter felt compelled to take some action, to respond to the appeal he claimed to have received. We followed him down to the cellar, to a spot close, in fact, to where Chrissy claimed to have had her encounter. And he began to go through what he described as a release process.
I would ask for those of you who are with me just to be still for a moment and think of him as a person who's been lost for many years in between these worlds and who's now taking a big step in his life because he's going to be free for the first time for a long time. And so what we do is we create an energy into which he can move. Evermore, come on, sunshine, where are you? Okay, it's all right. Come on, towards me, you're okay. That's it. Okay, come on, you're all right. There's nothing to bother about, you can do it. Just walk into the light. Okay, he's moving forward now towards me. He's actually standing just in front of me now. Okay, it's all right. Just bring yourself forward. That's it. Okay, just step into the light. That's it. Okay, you're in. Okay, we ask a divine and loving Father that this your servant be received into the light. Amen. Okay. Thank you.
Peter took with him down to the cellar a number of people whom he said were needed to absorb some of the emotional energy of the parting. When we spoke to them immediately afterwards, they clearly had experienced a powerful emotional connection.
Just before Peter was releasing him, I felt I wanted to shout to him, to call him, to make sure that this is the right thing that we were doing, that this was really what he wanted. You know, I had to really hold myself back from calling his name. Not that I really know it, but I just felt I needed to shout, to yell at him, to say, is this right? Is this what you want? Then, once Peter said, you know, that was it, he had gone, and it all happened so very quickly, which surprised me. I thought it was something that would take a while. I felt I wanted him to show us something, that he was fine and that he was safe. I still feel a little bit like that. I felt calmer. While it was all going on, I felt very tingly. My arms were aching. I felt very strange. I can't explain. A bit like having a very mild electrical sensation at my arms. That's still there slightly, but it's gone. But I feel it's like a sad. It's not sad. I can't explain. I just feel very strange.
One has to ask, how much of this is pure theatre, pure hokum? Most scientists would say just about all of it. But is that the whole picture? There is nothing here of the things that science is best at, nothing to measure or to weigh, nothing to run controlled tests on. We're into a different world, a world that has a high emotional or spiritual dimension, certainly a world where science has never been very comfortable. And the same is undoubtedly true of Peter's explanation of what was going on.
Basically, he's some sort of energy form. He hasn't got a body, the same as you and I, but he's got an energy form. Now, his energy form rightly shouldn't be on the Earth. And people ask me this question, and I say, well, you've seen relatives die. And you can go and look at a body a few hours after death, and you'll say, there's nothing there. Whatever it is, that spark has gone. Now, in the normal course of events, people will move from one vibration, from one place to another. I mean, religiously, it might be called heaven. But if you think of it in terms of energy, rather than religion, in scientific method, they've moved one vibration to another and they're away. Now, and if a person goes from this world unprepared and not prepared to go, then they can, through no fault of their own really, find themselves in some sort of in-between world of existence. The nearest that I could describe it is like walking through a foggy room, and that you are not where you feel you rightly belong, either here on the earth because you can't communicate with anybody, except occasionally, in this case, this young man manifested to people on odd occasions, so he did have some form of communication with certain people. But neither was he with those who've also passed over previously. So he's in between the two. I mean, the nearest is being stuck in an escalator between two floors.
That kind of explanation is not unique. It's one that's been expressed by psychic mediums for over 100 years, longer. And the fundamental problem, of course, is that we are out at the very edge of the credible, well beyond the bounds of conventional scientific analysis. That's very frustrating, of course, particularly if you are of a scientific bent and like nice, neat equations. But we have to ask, does that make it any less real?
Anthropologists were very much struck by the fact that the basic spiritual beliefs of people who could not have had any cultural contacts, you know, people living in Patagonia and people living in the North Pole, did appear to have identical spiritual beliefs. And these spiritual beliefs always involve the notion that it is possible for spirits not to know that they're dead and to get trapped into a kind of limbo from which they need to be released, if possible, by the actions of the living. So this seems to be a general belief among all people all over the world, and I would take it that is true.
My own philosophy is rather dualistic. I think there are one set of laws for the mind and another set for matter, and that what science knows to a very advanced degree are the laws that govern the behavior of matter, and perhaps the laws that govern the behavior even of the brain. But over and above all that, I believe mind is a power in the universe, and that mind can achieve things that are simply not allowed for in the accepted scientific scheme, which is basically a physicalistic picture of reality.
If you're a physicist, you tend to think of the real world as the physical world of 3 dimensions of space, 1 dimension of time, the 4-dimensional world of Einstein. That's what we tend to think of as physical reality. So you say something is real because it exists in that 4-dimensional world, 4-dimensional space-time. But my own view is that we cannot be completely sure that that's what reality consists of exclusively. One has to bear in mind the possibility that there could be a higher level of reality of which the physical world, what we call the physical world, is just a part. So that even though something isn't real in the sense that it's not part of the physical 4-dimensional space-time of physics, conceivably there might be this higher world with respect to which it has a reality.
If we could get back to this state of mind that was probably absolutely taken for granted in ancient Egypt at the time they built the pyramids, say 2500 BC, we would find this whole question of the paranormal completely self-evident and obvious. There wouldn't be any question about it, because they didn't see any distinction between this world and the next. And I'm sure they were perfectly right. I'm sure they could actually see spirits wandering around. Certainly, their priests could. Now, we've deliberately suppressed that faculty because it's useless to us. It would distract us, and would certainly distract us from, building the kind of civilization that we have got. Therefore, it's extremely important that we don't start getting it back.
It has to be said that nothing about the events at the Drum Inn can be described as proven in the scientific sense. But then our minds are difficult to identify, and yet we're all quite sure we have one. There is clearly much more to this world than is dreamt of in the purely scientific philosophy. The $64,000 question, of course, is how much more? It would seem that Chris's encounter lies in that grey area. The conversation she claims to have had with a young man who died all those years ago would seem to raise the most profound questions about what happens after death.